Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. And in this video, yes, I appreciate it is a rather long video if you look at the timestamp, but in this video I'm going to be speaking with SkillUp in just a second. We're talking about the kind of current issues with the game and how we would address the main points in 1.4, the fixes that we would like to see implemented, some of the drastic changes, all that stuff. So it's a really good chat. There's a lot of really good points made in that discussion that I think you guys will be really interested in. So I do encourage you to try and watch it, even if you kind of watch it in chunks, kind of go and have dinner in between or whatever. However, just before I get started, I want to speak very quickly about the Elite Task Force, because a lot of you guys have been asking in the comments on Twitter saying, you know, Arekkz, are you going to be going to Malmo to help fix the game? Please go and help fix the game. And a lot of you guys even went as far as to, you know, message Hamish and Yannick and the Division Game handle on Twitter saying, you know, please send Arekkz. And honestly, thank you very much for that. It's super awesome that you guys would kind of put your trust in me and sort of, you know, ask me to go over there and try and help fix the game. However, unfortunately, as much as I really, really want to go, I'm actually unable to. I've got a clash at the very same time. I was invited. The guys at Massive reached out to me. In fact, the day that they kicked off the Elite Task Force sign up, they actually reached out to me and said, you know, would you like to come along or can you come along? And believe me, if it were any other date, I would have been there in a heartbeat. I am super invested in this game. As you guys know, if you've been following me from the very, very beginning, I've basically covered Division since pretty much the moment it was announced, give or take. So I am super invested in this game. But unfortunately, I'm actually in America this week on the exact same dates as the Massive Summit. And it's something else that's super important. I can't talk about it just yet. Of course, that'll be made clear on the channel later on. But the long and short of it is, the dates clash, and it's just simply impossible for me to kind of change those dates. I did ask the guys at Massive if I could come down earlier or later, but of course, because the whole summit takes out of development time, it's just not a feasible thing. That being said, I do speak to the guys over there on a relatively frequent basis, and I'm actually in the process of writing basically an essay that's just like what the main problems are that, you know, I see, how I would kind of fix them, all that kind of stuff like that. So I'm going to be sending over that essay to the guys so they can take a look at it, as well as this video. So believe me, even though I'm not there, I am doing everything in my power to try and get as involved as possible, try and, you know, have an input and try and, you know, make sure that you guys are heard as well. So believe me when I say that I'm still doing my bit, even if I'm not actually going to be there. That being said, I do know some of the guys that are going, so I know that we are going to be very well represented. I know that Marco's going. I know that Deep Fried Dave is going. There are a few other people as well. So I have every faith in the guys that are going, and believe me that behind the scenes, I'm also working very hard to try and make sure that we are also heard. So rest assured, I'm doing my bits. But this video is already long enough, so I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to jump over now to the chat with SkillUp. Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here. I am, of course, joined by SkillUp. How you doing, man?
I am super good, man. How are you?
I am very good. I am very good. So we are, of course, here to speak about how to fix the Division. A game that's very, very close to, of course, both of our hearts. Been covering this for a very, very long time. We are massively invested in it and we want to fix the game. Let's be honest. We do, right? So
we want to help. We want to do what we can, and we're very bummed that we can't be at Malmo. So this is our thing. This is the little help we can offer. This is the way we can do it.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know. Yeah, we are definitely, you know, we're communicating with the guys at Massive anyway. So even though we're not actually there as part of the Elite Task Force, know that our feedback is definitely getting through. So we are doing everything in our power to make sure that we can help get this fixed. And on that point, what we're going to do in this video is basically discuss top line. Obviously, if we had, you know, endless time, we went on for hours, we could speak about absolutely everything. But one of the things that's important to realize is that when you want to get a game fixed, you have to work within the constraints of what the developer can do in time. You know, they have until October. This is a big fix. It's a big patch, 1.4, but it's not about adding new content. So there's no point kind of talking about crazy ambitious ideas like, let's add things like raids and battle royale. Believe me, I'd love to see them, but it's not the time for this. Yeah, it's what we need to do is, if we want to be heard and we want to get the game fixed, we need to work within what they are addressing. So as a quick recap, for 1.4, we know their main points are gear sets and weapon balancing, enemy difficulty and time to kill, solo player experience, making loot drops more relevant to the player, and dark zone and PvP balancing. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk within those points, because if we can address and how to fix things within that scope, then it's a lot more feasible that they can actually take that on board and actually try and implement it. So yeah, I guess we should probably get started, right?
Let's do it, man.
There's
so much to talk about and so little time. We've got to get right on it.
Yes, definitely. We're going to try and keep this as short as possible. So we're going to start off with gear sets and weapon balancing. So I think let's begin with, I personally think, I think we can kind of, you know, we'll obviously agree and disagree on different things, but I think before we even speak about gear sets and rebalancing, the fundamental gear system needs to be redesigned, right? Gear as it exists like right now, I think just isn't quite right. I think you'd agree?
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Well, let me throw it to you first. Like, where do you feel gear should be?
Yeah, I think, well, there's many parts to it, which I know we'll talk about. But I think one of the biggest challenges right now is that you're forced to make very binary decisions when it comes to how you gear your character. It's like, do you want HP and toughness, or do you want firearms?
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's a really false choice, because obviously I need HP. That's a minimum requirement, right? I need toughness. I need to be as close to the armor cap as I can be, because one, content demands it right now. It's so overtuned. But two, like in any game, I need HP. Like, it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously after that, it's a question of like, how do I deal my damage? Do I deal my damage with my weapon, or do I deal it by some other means? Like, my abilities, or in other games it would be like through my spells, for instance.
Yes,
if this
exactly.
was some sort of, whatever, classic RPG. So I think that one of the key challenges right now is the fact that that items don't come baked in with a base amount of stamina. I really think that if I was to make one immediate change, it would be that every item has stamina as a base, and then after that, and armor as well, obviously, because items already come with armor. And then after that, they come with either firearms or electronics. So we all have enough HP to walk around and, be moderately effective without just getting one shot by everything. And obviously, if we want to go deeper into that tank specialization, we can pile on more toughness and, more armor, whatever. But at least we all have the basic amount of HP that we need without having to choose between, as I said, like straight damage versus HP. Because I just think that's a bit of a silly choice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, exactly to your point. You never want to. I mean, you look at like when the struggles people have online, whether it be Reddit, whether it be in YouTube comments, where people are like, I want to try and branch down this path, but I don't want to become a squishy. It's like, nobody wants to, right? I think it's important that like an appropriate baseline is introduced to the point where everyone is like, you could know, for example, that if I maxed out with like, say, full gear score items and I have like a decent amount of gear on, then I have enough health to survive basically everything, right? Obviously, if you want to go, especially become tanky, to your point, then yes, you can spec that way. But I think everyone should be in a position where, you should never feel squishy at the end of the game. Like, you shouldn't have gone through all the incursions and all these gear sets and still feel like paper, right? That is fundamentally wrong, right? So
Totally. And as I said, it's important that you can choose to be less tanky than someone else because you're investing in damage, but you still need to be able to have a certain amount of base HP, right now 400k toughness is kind of the community consensus for where we need to be, and that kind of feels sort of around right. It's like you can take 2 to 3 shots, or like, depending on the context, you can maybe take 2 shots from a level 35 enemy and without dying. That kind of feels about right in terms of like, the minimum that we might want to have. Anything on top of that is where we need to invest additional armor. So I just think that there's a fair amount of tweaking that's required there with regards to, a minimum amount of HP plus damage on top of that. Yeah,
well, I think as well on top of that, the other important thing to kind of bear in mind is that we should try and aim for a slightly more normalized model anyway. Like, if you think back to, I mean, this extends to endgame activities and also to what we'll get to at the end, the Dark Zone and PvP balancing, because think back to like the beta, think back to pre 1.1, right, where combat in the Dark Zone, or endgame and endgame as well. But let's kind of use the Dark Zone as a proof point, right? The Dark Zone was for the most part relatively balanced. It wasn't perfect, but it was. Encounters were relatively balanced. You could fight someone. If you got run up on someone, you would have the time to turn around, think about what you're doing, use some skills, fight someone back, and then generally speaking, people were within, say, 50 to 100,000 points, whether that be firearms or stamina, which is still competitive, right? Whereas now, I mean, you remember when we had that 1.3 chat with, Marco managed to hit 700,000 toughness. I mean, that's insane, right? But I mean, but that kind of disparity is the problem we've got now. That was never really a thing when you had just high end gear. The introduction of gear score, and of course, the raise in, the introduction of toughness and all this, the new armor cap and stuff. It just means that it's widened the gap. And the problem with this as well is that, while I'm a strong believer that, if you're a person that can invest a lot of time, you need to be able to get something out of it. There's no point saying if someone can invest 1,000 hours in the game, they should, rightly so, have more stuff or have more to show than someone that's invested 10 hours. But at the same time, it's important for the end game model not to make it so that the person that's only invested 10 hours has no hope in hell of catching up, right? There still needs to be some appropriate competition, right? And this is what the gear model doesn't have right now. So I've got like something written down here. Let me kind of like throw this to you and sort of see what you think about this, because this is what I would personally do as like a drastic gear model rework.
Sure.
So at top line, I would have it so that, because as mentioned, everyone wants to have health, everyone wants to have toughness, and no one in their right mind would want to not be at armor cap, right? So my model would be as such. If you have max gear score items, you would have the armor required to hit armor cap. Let's just say, for the time being, whether it be 70%, whether it be 60%, whether we save something for, like people that want to be slightly more tanky, but having max gear score items has a fixed amount of armor that you don't need to roll in. So therefore, by having it equipped, then you're already fully armored up. On top of that, attribute stat rolls would still roll within a range, so that way you can still account for min-maxing. That's completely fine. I agree with you, though, that they should all come with stamina baked in, so you don't really have to account for that. I do agree that you should perhaps just account for firearms and electronics. I think you should be able to swap attributes. You can pay for it. It can come at a cost. That's completely fine. But as many times as you want, it shouldn't be like a lockout at the recalibration station, because then if you want to, say if you're going to an activity, it's like, all right, guys, we need a DPS guy. You can be like, hold on a minute, I'll shuffle my gear around, take the electronics out, push in firearms, and you're there. But if you say, I need a healer, you can shuffle around, so you're not kind of locked out. I then think you should remove skill bonuses from armor and just keep major and minor bonuses, and then that can work as it does right now. You can have like ammo capacity or some of the other bonuses you've got, and if you roll out one of them, you can still be locked out, so the kind of recalibration model remains the same. Then this is the pretty drastic thing, right? I propose that we remove stamina, firearms, and electronics gear mods, and you just have performance gear mods, and then skill attributes are then placed onto performance gear mods. So then the reason behind modding gear is no longer about drastically boosting your firearms or your stamina, because again, we're trying to aim for a normalized model here. It's actually about, all right, I've now got a build that, I'm happy with my stamina, I'm happy with my firearms, I now need to look at my skills. Because this is the thing, the game doesn't put enough focus, weirdly, on skills. Everyone's just using Pulse or using Smart Cover. It needs to be like, all right, I want to run tank, so now let me go and get a load of performance gear mods that enhance, say, the ballistic shield, so I can now assume that role, right? And I think that's what I would like to see with the gear model. And then, of course, what you then end up with, like as an end result, is a player with a suitable amount of stamina, the firearms or electronics, depending on how they spec, a number of major minor attributes, and then skills that they can then swap out. Because then it becomes like, you could then save groups of performance gear mods. You could be like, all right, if I'm running sticky bomb for this thing, I'll pull out my my performance sticky bomb gear mods, throw them on. Alternatively, if you're like, all right, I need to run pulse for this team, I'll grab my pulse mods, and then it's a lot more interesting for a gear model.
Totally agree with you. It's exactly what I had sort of come up with myself when I was thinking about how I would approach this. Because it's an idea that's been bouncing around in the community for a while as well. A lot of people have seen this as an opportunity, and I totally agree. The idea that we're able to choose where we invest our stats around our abilities is just an awesome idea. Right now, it's like we basically have to ignore the stat slots down the very bottom of our gear. Like, it's nice if it happens to be pulse or smart cover or heal. Like, they're like, yoo-hoo, that's a bonus. But like, we don't really care. We're still really looking at the other stats. And I think the solution to that is, as you've said, let's replace those with slots that allow us to use performance mods. Let's buff performance mods, because right now they're not compelling, right?
Yes.
So let's increase those values so that they're really good, and then let's allow us to slot them into our items to really, help us differentiate those builds. I think that's a totally awesome idea. The only other thing I would add to that suggestion in terms of the model you've proposed is I really think we need a radical revisit of the firearms and electronics stats themselves, because the efficacy of those stats is so much less than what it should be. Like, I can pile on so many firearms, like so much firearms, and it makes very little difference to my net DPS. Versus if I pile on heaps of toughness stamina and armor, where it completely skyrockets my toughness, right? The difference being that like toughness scales exponentially, right? Whereas firearms and electronics scale in a very linear sense. The detail behind that doesn't really matter, but the point is, right, we just need to get it to the point where firearms and electronics feel good to equip. Because right now, most people are only equipping firearms to 2850 to hit their weapon talents, and after that, anything else they just ignore. On the electronics side, they're trying to get as few electronics as they can, just to be able to hit like 30, 35k, because they're getting skill power from their backpack and from their mask. That's generally the way that people are doing this. So I think all of that just reads a big revisit. These stats are not compelling enough right now. They're not differentiating me enough now. And it's a combination of those stats just being quite weak, but also the fact that I get so much other bonus damage from somewhere else that firearms and electronics just don't compete, relatively speaking.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be a lot, it needs to be a lot clearer as well. Because I mean, for someone that wants to actually aim for something, right, it's so difficult to try and understand the gear model. It's, when you have major and minor bonuses, you have skill bonuses, you have firearms, you have all these different sources where stuff's coming from. Like you want to be very clear cut. Be like, all right, if I want, to the average player that doesn't necessarily understand every aspect about the game, it's like, if I want to increase my damage, where do I go?
Yeah.
Right. And this is the thing. The game doesn't telegraph that in a clear way at all. I mean, to your point as well. Yeah, people completely ignore the minor bonuses because if you happen to have a piece of gear and you roll one thing, considering there are 6 things that you can re-roll on a piece of gear on average, and after rolling one, everything's locked out. I mean, that's a horrible model. So,
Totally.
Okay.
I think the challenge with this for Massive as well is, I know this is the last thing I'll say on it,
That's
I know we need to move on, but like the challenge is that this is a looter, right?
Yes.
The loot that drops is our incentive to play.
Yes.
Loot needs to have its own individual identity, right? Otherwise, there's going to be no incentive for us to play. If we just get an item and we can customize it to the nines through multiple recalibrations and multiple mod slots for our abilities and all this sort of stuff, then that loot model breaks. So I'm agreeing with you in the sense that like I do think we need to go in this direction, but I think it also needs to have the right amount of RNG in there to keep the game interesting and to keep us grinding for drops. Otherwise, we're just going to have best in slot loot in like 3 weeks' time, and then we're going to be completely bored.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there's definitely a balance to strike there. It's definitely somewhere between. Yeah, you have to have like a recalibration lockout to a certain extent, and but you definitely can't have it quite as because it's physically impossible to try and get. Well, I mean, it's not impossible. There's obviously a very very small chance, but it's basically impossible to get a perfect piece of gear given the current amount of RNG. So
for sure, absolutely.
So within this section, a couple more things we kind of all touched on. Of course, this is going to be like the biggest, one of the biggest sections anyway. But following on from like a gear redesign, let's talk quickly about gear sets. So I will go out there and say right now that I feel that gear sets should not, as a gear set bonus, should not offer flat damage increase. That's not what gear sets should do, right? In my opinion, I think Striker and Sentry are bad gear sets, right? Not because they're good in game because they provide you great damage, but that's not what a gear set should do. I think personally, examples of good gear sets: Predator, right? Alpha Bridge, things that allow you to do things. This is my sentiment for gear sets. They should allow you to do things, give you abilities that you cannot otherwise have. That's what makes them compelling, right? Like saying, I want to play in the Dark Zone, let me go for Bleed, because that's actually something that's useful in combat. I want to go and like mess around with some more weapon talents, let me go for Alpha Bridge. Even to a certain extent, at a stretch, even though it's not actually the most useful thing in the world. Is it Final Measure, the one that consumes the grenade that gets thrown into?
Yeah.
I mean, that's that kind of thing they're going for. That's interesting. It should be like gear sets should provide interesting ways to play, because again, it's about trying to like combine or like provide a unique or like a central path to your things, right? So it shouldn't again be from like, oh, now I've also got a 7th way to give me more damage. So I think for gear sets, they definitely need to. I mean, I would for 1.4 be completely happy for them to either ditch half of them and just keep the ones that work, or just ditch them all together and just be like, well, let's just wait until let's return to. I mean, obviously that's probably not quite viable given that you would need to give people a replacement.
And when you say ditch, Arekkz, I'm sure you don't mean delete, because I can already hear the comment section going nuts about that. I'm sure you mean something like park them and rework them later on and focus on other gear sets. Right? I put up a video recently talking about the fact that Massive may delete gear sets. It is a possibility, right? And everyone was going completely mental. They're like, if that happens, I quit the game. Like, fair enough. Everyone's worked hard for their gear, but
I mean, on that point very quickly though, I think it's important to bear in mind that sometimes you do need to have drastic things. I appreciate people who work very hard for stuff. I've spent hundreds of, maybe even thousands of hours trying to like, go towards stuff, but remember that some other games do have this model. I mean, like you take like World of Warcraft, for example. Every time a new tier of raid comes out, everything else becomes obsolete, right? So I think it's a format that maybe not everyone's used to right now. But as as like I know that you and I play World of Warcraft, so we're very much used to you grind a raid, you get your tier gear, the next expansion comes out, and everything you have is just useless. You throw it away and you start all over again. Immediately
useless.
Yeah.
It is totally. And I guess this is the decision for Massive. Like, are they going to make it so that our existing stuff gets improved? Or are they going to make it that we just aim for new things? Maybe they up the gear score level and introduce a new tier of content. And so our existing gear stays the same, but then the new tier is what we sort of aim for, and it's the new and improved stuff. But the challenge with that, obviously, is things like Century or Striker or Reclaimer are so strong right now that you would literally need like a 50 to 60% increase in stats like from a new gear set, from a new tier, in order to replace those old gear sets because they're just that strong. Do you know what I mean? So that is the challenge that I'm sure Massive are wrestling with right now.
Yeah, you kind of have to be brave and drastic in these situations, because it's the problem they have right now with the game at the moment is it's seesaw balancing, right? It's like, oh, this is messed up. Let's fix this, and then suddenly something else falls out of balance. It's like it's physically impossible, because I mean, like, even the fact that people are still rocking, like Reclaimer and Savage, right? Even though that's gear score 204 items, they're still viable. I mean, it's the model they currently have right now, because of course gear score only offers you a better pool of stuff. It doesn't actually mean anything as a physical number, right? So it's like, it's as it currently exists now, unless they do something drastic, like give people a reason whereby all the old gear is actually not useful. People are still not gonna change, right? And that's the problem model. I mean, it happened in Destiny, right? When Thorn was a weapon that like ruined the Crucible, and then they introduced there was a new Crucible mode that didn't actually matter what gear you wore. You had people brought back Thorn. Like, it's like, you have to give people a reason to, and if you have to force people's hands, sometimes it is for the better. I appreciate people are not going to be too happy with the fact it's like, all right, I work for this stuff, but sometimes if you want the whole experience to be better, you have to be drastic sometimes. And
totally,
if I'd be all for it, but at the moment,
I agree.
When we understand that 1.4 is not a content patch, it's a fixed patch, then obviously deleting stuff is not an option when you can't replace it with stuff. So it might well be that we have to sit with gear sets until Survival comes out, because Survival could well be the point where after 1.4 they lay the foundations, and then Survival is like, all right, like, here's some new stuff, the level cap's been raised, the power cap's been raised, you're now forced, your hand has been forced, and then it's like, all right, now let's start again. But until we know that, gear sets is a bit of a weird one to try and deal with. There's not like a complete solution, I think, but the main thing we want to aim for is that gear sets should provide interesting abilities, not flat damage boosts, and they should provide you with things that you cannot otherwise get.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've said exactly the same thing as you for a long time now, which is, stats, free stats in anything, be they abilities or gear sets, I'm totally against. Like, Pulse, I think, is a shit ability. You press one button, you have X-ray vision, you have bonus damage, you have free crit, you have free crit hit damage. Like, what the hell is that? That's just stupid. Do you know what I mean? Like, cool, I get it that we need it right now because content is overtuned, but it's really boring and lazy design.
Yeah.
And Smart Cover is exactly the same thing. And Century's Call is exactly the same thing. It's like, shoot a target in the head, get free damage. When are we not shooting targets in the head? Do you know what I mean? That's how we do. That's what this game is. So, I mean, like, I'm really for a redesign of sets that, like, still makes the player really powerful. Power in this game is so important. We need to feel powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it makes you powerful in an interesting way. And, like, one example could be, like, what if we had Strikers, right? What if Strikers only gave you the bonus damage if you use, say, mobile cover, right?
Yeah.
So you had to throw a mobile cover up and forward, and then you ran up to it, you got behind it, and then you started shooting enemies, and then you got that bonus damage. So that's a really good example of, like, sure, you're getting your bonus stats, but you had to use an ability to get them, and you had to interact with that ability in a specific way to get this bonus damage out of it. Like, that's cool for me. That I see as being, like, that is mixing things up, and it also just sort of, like, resurrects a completely useless ability in the process.
Yes.
So, like, that's where I'd love to see the design go. I would love to see ability-driven gear sets that give me power, make me feel really strong. But I do think, though, that there needs to be a normalization. And what I mean by that is we need to buff a number of gear sets and we need to adjust some others so that they are equal strength. I really think gear sets should give us around 15 to 20% bonus power versus right now, some of them are giving us like 50% bonus power or more, and it just makes every other gear set look completely unviable.
Yeah.
I would love it if all gear sets were equal. They all should make us feel strong. They all should make us feel powerful, but no one gear set should be the clear best gear set, because that is just really lame at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And again, to kind of reiterate, the nice thing about a normalized model is it then brings the skill. It brings the skill back into gameplay, right? It means if you're in the if you're in the dark zone, you're not, because this is the thing as well. Like, if you die in the dark zone, 9 times out of 10, I'm not trying to take away from players that are actually, like, really skilled in the game, but a lot of the time, if you win your encounters, you got to ask yourself: are you winning because you are genuinely a better player, or are you winning because your gear is just so much better than someone else's? And I think if you're going to be honest with yourself, you would probably say it's the latter, right? It's my gear is so good that I've destroyed this person. Because you don't have, if you think about your encounters as well, you don't have those encounters where it's like, oh, this is quite balanced. It's like, no, it's either you rip through someone's health, or you can't kill them because they're like shooting iron. So yeah. But anyway,
totally.
So the very last thing in this topic is weapon balancing. I feel like we've spent a lot of time on gear. Weapon balancing. I'm gonna throw it to you for this one because you're like you've got kind of your head screwed on right about weapons. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. All right, well, I've got a few things. I'm going to burn through them very quickly, and then we can talk about them. But first of all, we need to delete some of the shit stats. Initial bullet stability and hip fire accuracy are rubbish, and they both need to go, right? I've tested these stats extensively. They give you almost nothing, and they're basically just stat bloat at this point. So I would immediately delete those and just make everyone's life easier. Number 2, talents. Half of the talents on weapons are shit, and they could immediately be deleted, or they could be significantly revised, right? So that's another thing. And I think, furthermore, there are a number of really awesome talents that are actually dependent upon you landing the killing blow. All you need to do is change that modifier so that they only so that they proc if you've like shot the enemy within 5 seconds of it dying, for instance. You immediately get yourself an additional 6 or 7 weapon talents that become viable. And like that's just an instant win right there.
Correct, yes.
I would say another thing is streamlining weapon talent requirements. Now, like right now, we have to ignore so many weapon talents because of their electronics requirements, because those requirements are completely incompatible with the way that we are playing the game and we are gearing ourselves. So I think that there needs to be a rebudgeting of electronics across weapon talents. I think actually firearms and stamina are pretty fine, but electronics needs some serious work. I would say we need to buff the underperforming weapon options. So like the Scar H marksman rifle, for instance, which nobody uses. The Vector, which now is like not very good. A number of LMGs, etc. All of these I think need to be buffed so they become more competitive. And we definitely need to rebalance the M870 because right now it is like not great.
Yeah.
And the very last thing is named weapons, which we'll talk about. But there's so much to talk about there. But that's my main hit list. Like get rid of some stats, get rid of some talents, fix up our talent requirements, buff underperforming weapons, and buff name weapons. I reckon if we did that, we'd be in a pretty good place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think there are some talents that when you read them, like they're quite. I mean, for example, some of those ones where they provide blind or they set targets on fire or things like that. I mean, they're interesting ones, or when you make them bleed, right? They're really like as talents, they're really interesting. But the way in which they, as you say, the way in which they proc, it just doesn't make sense. And it's just that's the thing as well. I mean, this is the problem with the weapon talent model right now is that again, and I mean, it's not it's not the player's fault. The player naturally wants to do the most damage. They want to feel powerful, and that's what no one ever feels in this game. And because of that, you can probably count on one hand the number of talents that people should always use. It's always the same recommendations. Deadly, brutal,
absolutely.
And it's like that's again not a good model. It's like you need to make people want to use other stuff, right? So no, I completely agree. And I think again, if we adopt the normalized gear model that we proposed, you do have a gear redesign. You definitely need to shuffle the way you unlock them because if we're trying to aim for a model where everyone has say like a similar amount of stamina and armor, unless you're tank spec, then you're not going to be as free to shuffle around crazy things like stamina and stuff. So I don't know whether they just change the way in which you unlock things altogether, or whether I mean to a certain extent, would it really be bad if you look at like other games, for example, Destiny? You have a weapon and you upgrade that weapon, and once you've upgraded it, it's got the talents unlocked. I mean, would it really be so bad to have a model where say it comes with 3 talents baked in, and you then pay some kind of material to upgrade the weapon, and then once it's done, it's just got them unlocked? I mean, do we? Because this is the problem you have as well. It's like if you really want to be, it's that weird balance, right? It's like you need to give people something to aim for, so that you so people keep coming back and they do have to grind out for stuff. But at the same time, it's like it's frustrating a lot of the time if you've built a really nice build. Like I've done this so many times. I've built a really nice build, and I'm like, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with my stats. I think it's a really good build, and then you're like, but I've got no weapon talents unlocked. I mean.
It's so lame.
Yeah.
It's really lame. We work so hard to get these weapons in the first place. I reckon you could totally delete the weapon talent requirements and everyone would be happy. You know what I mean? Like, if I've grinded hard to get an item that has the right talents on it, which is a huge amount of RNG in the first place, and I've recalibrated it, 5 or 6 times to get the talents that I want, and I have a build that works really well, then, cool.
Why punish you?
That's
why
fine.
punish you for it?
Like, what? Like, the only way that I would see that working is that, like, maybe, for instance, there's some sort of relationship between the strength of those talents and your current build to keep things in check. Like, I don't know, if there's some electronics-based talent, maybe you get less benefit out of it if you have less electronics. It kind of scales dynamically. I don't know, I'm just talking here.
That could be cool,
That could be cool as well. I mean, that's vastly overcomplicating things, I think. But regardless, I just think that system right now is definitely not fun because, yeah, you're right. We get this gear and then we build these builds that are cool, and then we look at our weapon talents and we're like, oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh well, I'll still use it anyway.
A lot of the time, it's like trying to put like a square peg in a circle hole a lot of the time, right? So it's just not it doesn't. I mean, you could even to a certain extent, if you want to try and make it like a slightly more achievable model, you could to a certain extent, and I'm not necessarily suggesting this is the right thing. You could almost remove the ability to recalibrate weapons, because if you're then going to go back to a model where everything is automatically unlocked, right? Then maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it's like, all right, I got a weapon. This is what it, everything is unlocked on it, but this is how it comes. If I'm not happy with it, I have to get another one. Maybe that's not the right model. I'm not saying that's a great suggestion, but I'm saying that if you do need to balance out the fact that everything, a model where you have to unlock stuff versus a model where everything is already unlocked, then you obviously have to have a balancing point, right? So it's not just a case of, oh look, I've got brutal deadly, I'm good to go kind of thing. So
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I definitely agree that it needs to be a better way to do that.
And named weapons, man, this is just so ripe. Like it is the shittiest system right now. There is
terrible.
It's like if it's worth using, it's the Caduceus. It's pretty much the only named weapon.
Other one was Midas before it was patched.
That's right.
I know it was broken, but it was the most powerful feeling weapon I've ever had. Like it was the only time in the game where I've got a weapon and I had my live reaction on stream. I was like, holy crap, I feel like a god. And maybe that's not necessarily what you need to... Yeah, obviously, that's definitely not achievable because it was outright broken. But you need to have that feeling. Like, if you get something and you grind for... I did 25 heroics back-to-back to get Showstopper. And I was like, all right, it's cool, but...
Got it on my very first one, by the way, Arekkz. Did I mention that one?
Screw you, man. But at least Showstopper to a certain extent was going in that direction because it's the only one that actually has a talent you can't get elsewhere. Right, but they need to do that. They need to feel special. They need to feel good. They don't necessarily have to be. In fact, they shouldn't always be the most powerful thing in the game because it shouldn't be the be all and end all. It shouldn't be like you have to have a named weapon because you don't want to have a whole Destiny Yellowhorn situation where you can't do this incursion unless you have a Caduceus. But
I'm really against them buffing them with specific abilities or talents.
Okay.
Right, in the sense that I just feel like that would make unless the talents were really carefully balanced.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's probably going to make those weapon true best in slot options, and we'll ignore so many others because you've got these weapons that I don't know. I just feel like from a design perspective, coming up with unique, interesting talents and then limiting them to only one specific weapon. I don't know. I don't like that idea. I really like that to be borne out through other systems, through abilities themselves or through gear sets or through so many other things. But I don't know. I just think forcing the player to use one specific weapon to get a specific talent or play style, I just don't quite like that idea. I'd rather see them just have better, not better stats, but what if all three of their talents were immediately unlocked and you could as in there they were for free? Do you know what I mean? And what if you could recalibrate them an endless number of times so that they're all still random, but it's clearly a better option, but it doesn't make the weapon a clear best in slot. Can't use anything else.
Yeah,
lock it in. That's my weapon for life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting example. I'm personally not. I don't mind the whole I quite like the exclusive. There's something you can get on this weapon that you can't get elsewhere. It just has to be done the right way, right? If as you say, that exclusive thing is the most powerful thing in the game, then that's a bad model because then it is best in slot. If it's more like a slightly different, more fun way to play, that's still good, still viable, still comparable with other things. It's just again, I don't know necessarily what the exact solution is, but they need to have something that other weapons don't have. But if it was something as simple as you can recalibrate or everything's already unlocked, then it's again. What's the true incentive to have that weapon? If it's got a name and it's got a special look to it, it needs to have something that nothing else can have. It still needs to be balanced, but it's like exotic weapons in Destiny, right? It's kind of that's effectively what named weapons are, right? They are exotic weapons, and all exotic weapons in Destiny do have special perks, and they still a lot of the time they are still beaten by legendary weapons. Partly because, of course, in the Destiny model you can only have one equipped at a time, but also because there are times when regular weapons are still better and that's where you need to strike the right balance, right? Because a lot of the time those perks are more interesting than just flat damage, and that's what it always comes back to again, right? It's just got to be, as long as it's something like the gear set model we were trying to aim for, so long as it's interesting but not.
I do agree. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, look, I think I think my fear is that like I've just seen how sort of badly weapons have been balanced in this game to date, and my concern is that same approach to balancing is applied to those unique talents, and then those talents just become God mode. You know what I mean? So I think you're right. I think Destiny is a good example of getting it right, where those talents aren't overpowered, like those unique abilities. And I think if we're able to get to that point, then I'd be all for it.
Maybe one of the simple solutions would be that, like, you know, whereas most weapons in the game have 3 talents, maybe named weapons have 4, and the 4th talent is something. For example, some of those unused weapon talents. Imagine if you had like a weapon where it provides you the effect of like toxic, or one of the ones that, you know, blinds or sets enemies on fire, right? And that's
totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean that could
totally.
Be cool.
That's perfect, because that fits within the spirit of what a looter is. A looter needs to have just lots of items, and all of them are good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that suggestion I think is perfect, because it means that these items are better, but they're not like God mode better.
Yes,
you're not going to default to them straight away, but there is definitely a clear difference that sets them apart statistically.
Cool. All right, sweet. Well, let's try and move on, because I do appreciate we spend a lot of time in that section. I mean, it's probably one of the most important sections, so it's fair enough. But let's move on now to enemy difficulty and time to kill. So right now, obviously, it's a big issue because you never feel powerful in the game, right? Enemies are ridiculously powerful, not in a fun way, not in an intelligent way. It's just bad, right? So
it is. It's terrible.
Yeah. So let's talk about overall difficulty right now. So how, like, we both play, you know, we both play a lot of games. We both play things like World of Warcraft. You know, we're used to kind of like, you know, how you deal with bosses and mobs and different encounters. So how would you deal with overall difficulty right now?
That's it's a really tough question. I really just feel like, again, I'm a numbers guy. I feel like it's possible to get to a point where you can look at a player's item level, you know, you can say at this item level, this player has this stat budget, right? The stat budget is, you know, X DPS and X stamina or health, X toughness, right? And then after that, you can say, well, this is how much health an enemy needs to have in order for me or the player to be able to kill that target inside of 3 seconds or 4 seconds, right?
Right, okay.
And similarly, this is how much damage an enemy needs to be dealing if I want them to kill a player in 5 to 6 bullets, for example, right? So I would purely just look at it from a numbers perspective and then say, let's try and recreate the feeling of 1 to 30, as in like level 1 to 30, because that felt right. Like when we shot an enemy, it took, you know, 7 or 8 rounds from an assault rifle. It took 1 to 2 headshots from a marksman rifle, 1 to 2 shots from a shotgun. It just felt right. Do you know what I mean? And like, if you balanced content along the curve of item level and you had a really strict item level budget that allowed you to do that, then like you're golden. Like it's so simple from that point. I know I'm oversimplifying it. I'm not a game designer. I'm sure there's lots of other complications in that, but for me, that's how I'd seen it. And I see it in so many other games. I know we come back to World of Warcraft so often, but like, you know, if you look at some of the most like brilliantly tuned encounters I've ever done in my life are in World of Warcraft. They know exactly how much damage 25 people can output over a 6-minute span to the exact number, you know? That kind of like tuning is so possible, and I really think it's possible here as well if Massive were to sort of commit to that proper item level budgeting and commit to recreating the feel of 1 to 30, because it just feels so good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the important thing to take from like the 1 to 30 model is this, like, it's a very simple enemy boss model that basically any MMO, like a lot of games use, right? Level 1 to 30, you've got trash mobs and you have bosses, right? And then you definitely, like, the concept of a trash mob is, to anyone that hasn't necessarily played an MMO, is a very, very weak enemy that you can burn through quickly, but they know the difficulty from trash mobs comes in the quantity, right? So I think, you know, like a good quote would be, I personally would rather fight 50 level 20 enemies than 5 level 50s, right? Because if you have, and you take like 1 to 30, right? You have your regular guys that run towards you. You can burn through them for the most part. The only people that really take a little bit longer to kill are your bosses, and that's fine, right? But you suddenly step to 30 plus and like the max bracket Dark Zone, and every single enemy you fight is a mini boss in themselves. Only the difference is only the ones with the yellow life bars actually give you loot. So suddenly you've turned a trash mob boss scenario into boss rush mode. Only 1 in 10 bosses gives you loot, which is a horrible model, right? So I think this is so in terms of like time to kill, enemies definitely need to have, you need to have that clear delineation. I mean, I use the Dark Zone as a very clean cut example. You know, you and I record our vendor reset videos on a Saturday. I spend time running every single vendor reset video. I run through the Dark Zone and I die. like 3 or 4 times. In fact, I just
exactly the same.
Yeah, in fact,
exactly
I just die near safe houses and just die on purpose just to be able to get there quicker, right? It's like because you can no longer run through the docks and you can't run past any of those mobs, and those mobs are the ones that should be trash mob. You should be able to run past them if you don't want to deal with them. You should be able to ignore them, and then your difficulty should come from quantity and bosses, right? That's a model that I think a lot of games use it, and they use it because it works, right? It then means that everyone in your team can contribute. I mean, you look at like when Falcon Lost first came out, right? When you were assembling teams and people were struggling with it, you look at how people were playing, and unless they were really finely geared, even regular mobs, like just a standard grunt that would come down with an assault rifle, not even like the shotgun guys, it would still take someone quite a while to kill a single mob. Like if your team is there needing a revive, most of the time if you fight a trash mob, you turn around, you shoot them a couple of times in the head, they're dead, you turn around, deal with your team. Like in Falcon Lost, when people were first doing it before they were fully geared, it was taking them a long time to kill those supposed trash mobs, and that's a problem. Right? You don't.
Yeah, totally.
So I think what we need to kind of what we definitely need to aim for difficulty is just if anything, increase the have more enemies, have them weaker, because you make the game feel more alive if there's more stuff to do. If there are more enemies around, it makes it more exciting. Make it so you can burn through them quicker, and then by all means, I mean you could go as far as to say that bosses as they exist right now are fine. Right, they're strong. They provide a challenge. Maybe they're not perfect, but if you then tone down everyone else, it would probably be a slightly more agreeable, more enjoyable model.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, yeah, basically trash mobs make you feel powerful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just cool to bring them down, and you feel strategic because you're like, well, that mob had the same damage output as that other mob, but it had way less health. I killed it. I've contributed strategically to my team.
Yeah.
And I felt good while doing it. And it's a straight up thing. Yeah, I think we should absolutely have them. Have more mobs, have trash mobs, and let's just keep the focus on those boss mobs. Let's have fewer of them. They're the ones that drop loot, but they're surrounded by other mobs that we're able to take down more easily. You know, I think that's just a better flow of combat. So. But I think the other thing I would say with difficulty, like obviously we've already spoken a lot about the impact of I have spoken a lot, I should say, about the impact of Sentry and Pulse and Smart Cover and these sorts of things. When in terms of them buffing our stats to the point where we're so strong that content is tuned around that. I actually really think that as Massive go through and do this rebalancing and they look at abilities, they look at gear sets, they look at stuff, then the abilities, I think that the difficulty is obviously going to come down.
Yes.
They have stated this as a clear design intent. I really do not expect that this game will be anywhere near as difficult into the future. So I think we should be talking about it for sure. But I think it's the same time, I think we should say, yeah, cool. I trust Massive on this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they're so clear that everyone is crying out for this. I hope that they'll get this one right. It's just so important, But the other end of the spectrum to this as well is I do worry that they will overdo it, and I do worry the game will become too easy. Okay, so my suggestion around difficulty is I really think there should be time-based incentives for the majority of activities that we do, and I'll explain why. Right now, it's possible for us just to sit behind cover forever and grind out content, like literally heal it to death, so to speak, because there's no time drive for us to complete it. There are some missions like HVTs or the Underground where there is a timer, but that timer is so generous, right, that you can do it no problem. And furthermore, there's no incentive for you to try and do it faster. It's kind of just like, well, let's just cruise and get it done because we know we have plenty of time. And I think especially with a loot-based game, and if you really want to encourage min-maxing and you want to encourage strategic play, I would really love to see got bronze, silver, and gold awards for completing certain endgame activities. Like, sure, everyone's going to get the bronze. It gets it done. Silver, you get yourself an extra, gear set item. Gold, you get yourself a gear set item and an extra weapon. Do you know what I mean? That would be awesome because that would just force everyone to be on their A game all the time, to min-max their builds, to min-max their team composition. That would be great. But it's also an optional level of difficulty. Like, you don't need to tune content to be harder, when it comes to that sort of framework. You can leave it the same difficulty, and you're essentially asking the player to make it more difficult for themselves by pushing them. Players have to push themselves to get it done faster. Yeah. So I would love to see.
Right, either that, or to a certain extent, you take the the underground model where they introduced like directives, right? I mean, that's something that's quite an interesting model as well. Might not be perfect, right? But to your point, you don't necessarily overtune it to make it too difficult. But then if you want to get better loot, whether it be time based as you suggested, or whether it be you optionally take on more, you take on things that hinder you, and in doing so, it's like the heroic mode, right? It's not that heroic is just like here's another 1,000 XP on top of everything, right? It's just okay. Actually, heroic is harder because I don't get reloads, I don't get revives, I don't get this, I don't get that. There are different ways to introduce difficulty without it just being slap on more health, right?
No, I agree with you, but I think. But I totally agree with what you're saying. I think though the directive system in its current form really sucks.
In its current
because
form, yes.
it doesn't actually force me to do anything other than what I would otherwise be doing. I'm going to sit behind smart cover. I'm going to drop a health like an health ammo station. I'm going to just Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I know, forgive us everyone for our sins for coming back to Destiny so often, but like Nightfalls, where Destiny has these modifiers on encounters that make them significantly tougher to complete, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a different kind of challenge. They've introduced a modifier there. It makes it harder. The reward goes up because of that. That works, right? And if you want to do it like that, cool. But you just need to tune it so that it's actually the right challenge.
Yeah.
But again, I think with a looter, time is such a factor. Like Diablo does this so well. It's like the faster you complete something, or if you can complete it by the timer, then you get to progress through the next greater tier. For instance, your rewards increase, etc. I would love to see something like that in Destiny. I think in the Division, I just would push all sorts of really interesting min-max styles of play. I think.
Yeah, and it will promote different skill usage as well. Cool. All right, sweet. Well, in that case, let's move on to the next section because I know we're already kind of pushing the time on this thing. So
Oh, wait, sorry, one more thing.
Sure.
Sorry, I have to say this, really important. Please, more checkpoints. Oh my god, it is the worst right now with so many encounters not having the right number of checkpoints.
Yes.
Wasting 45 minutes in Falcon Lost if you were doing it with a slow group, and then wiping is the worst feeling in the world. You just want to uninstall the game at that point.
Yeah.
So I really think that a very quick, easy win for Massive is to revisit their checkpoint system, because asking players to be perfect should not be a crutch for like difficulty design.
Yeah, that's I agree. Cool. Yeah. All right, sweet. Well, then let's move on to another one. Definitely a very, very important one for the community as well. It's solo player experience. Now, obviously, we play a lot of the time in the group, but I think it's important to. I'll start this one off by if you look at other games again, for an example, it's important to understand that the solo player experience doesn't always have to be, and shouldn't always be, an activity that you need to do solo, right? The solo player experience basically needs to, let me kind of explain that slightly better, is it needs to be an activity that you can do on your own, whether that be with with matchmaking or something else. So examples of that being challenge mode missions, you can matchmake them, whereas the converse example of that would be incursions, which you need matchmaking. You look at World of Warcraft, you have dungeons which you can matchmake, you can get endgame gear from. Raids you can't. So the important thing is that there needs to be, and while yes, challenge mode missions as they exist right now do give you endgame gear, the important thing to realize is there's not a very clear path. There's a very obvious path. You go to incursion, you get lots of nice cool stuff. You do a challenge mode mission, you get dribs and drabs. Maybe once in a while you get something cool, and that's the differentiating factor, right? Using say challenge mode missions as a solo player path is fine. But it's important that they have equal opportunities to people that play with gear. It's also fine for you to have certain things obtainable in group-only activities, because you still need to remember that this is fundamentally a group-based game. But it's very important that people that do play solo are not hurt as a result of it. Whether it's a case of Alpha Bridge comes from the incursion, but I don't know, Striker comes from challenge mode, where however you distribute it, there still needs to be a clear path. But I think it's important that people kind of recognize that solo player experience doesn't always have to mean this is an activity that is designed for one person. It's an activity that can be done if you are on your own, but
yeah, definitely, absolutely. I mean, personally, the solution I see to this is twofold. Number one, I really feel like pretty much everything in this game, I should be able to do it solo.
Yes.
Okay, the Dark Zone, we'll park that for now, because that's a whole other thing, right? When you introduce other players into the mix, it becomes far more complicated. Any activity, it would be cool if I could set the difficulty for that activity, right? And just choose how I want to play it.
Yeah.
And, or ultimately, it should scale to the number of people in my party. So if I go into a heroic mission, and I'm solo, it should be X amount of health per enemy, versus if another person joins my party, the health of enemies go up. So I can still solo it if I want. Now, every other game does this. Do you know what I mean? It's like a standard feature that difficulty scales based on party size, and there is no reason it couldn't work here.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a natural fit. But the other thing that I think is so important, and it's a really obvious thing, but like no one really talks about it, is like the res, right? As in, you cannot res yourself unless you are using a healing station or unless you are wearing Nomad. They are the only two means by which a player can resurrect themselves. Whereas in a party, you can resurrect yourself endlessly, or sorry, not yourself, you can resurrect others endlessly, right? I really think that if I'm playing solo, I should get a button that is available to me every 3 to 5 minutes that allows me to res myself. Like, it sounds a bit cheesy, but it's such a huge difference for players when they are able... Because difficulty is really tuned around this idea that if I die, I can get back up again, you know? Now, solo players don't get that, and that sucks. That really just blocks off a huge portion of the game, and it asks them to be perfect. Same sort of thing as I said before. Perfection should not be a crutch for difficulty.
Yeah.
So if they just had the ability to res themselves every 3 minutes when they are playing solo, I think that is just, awesome. That would be fantastic.
Or you look at something like Gears of War where you're down and you can keep tapping A to kind of get yourself back up. It takes you longer, and during that period of time you can get killed, but it means you can basically kind of self-revive yourself without the need for a skill. Something of that vein, because because then it's fair to say it's like, all right, you are going to have a harder time if you don't play with the team. It's a given, right? But it's not going to be hard to the impossible point. I mean, a couple of other things I want to kind of step on, jump on as well. I mean, take HVTs, for example, right? It's a really nice. It was a really interesting model. Let's ignoring the fact that it gives you only Lone Star, right? HVTs is a really interesting model, and when it first came out and when they first announced it, I was like, okay, that's really cool. That's an interesting thing for solo players. Something very, very easy that Massive could do for that, right? Why are gear score items, for someone that wants to gear up solo, why do gear score items have to be on the weekly only? Well, a model that I would propose, right? And I mean, yes, maybe it'll be a little bit easy, but you could have daily HVTs, right? Daily HVTs provide... You can still have the high difficulty ones, so they're still hard to do. Daily HVTs provide you with gear set pieces. Weekly can provide you with weapons, right? It then means that if a solo player wants to log on every single day and do those 5 HVTs to get a few different gear set pieces, because of the RNG system, there's no guarantee that they're going to be useful, right? But it means they can log on a daily basis and they have something else to aim for, instead of I've as a solo player, I've logged on one, this week, I've got my pieces of, I've done my HVTs, I'll come back next week, kind of thing. It's a very easy, very cheap fix to be like, all right, you've got more things to do on a daily basis. We're going to kind of throw gear at you, add in some more variety now. I mean, one of the other things I said that I would like to see, and I'll mention this slightly more in loot relevancy. But I feel like, there need to be clearer paths, especially if you're a solo player. Clear path as to, where do I go to get this gear? I know there are tables on Reddit where people have found out through trial and error where things come from. But take Monster Hunt. If you want to farm a Rathalos armor set, you hunt a Rathalos. You could do that in HVTs. You could be like, all right, there's you could call him the striker boss, and you know that when he comes around in rotation, he is the source for striker loot, right? It means that you don't then suddenly get rid of a complete activity because I'm never going to do HVTs because I don't want Lone Star. You could be you instead look at targets. You say, all right, Mr. Biker Man is known for dropping Alpha Bridge. Mr.
Biker Man,
Mr. Biker Man, Mr. Lorry.
That's right. Hope you're listening, Massive. That's what you're going to be naming an NPC Biker in the future, please.
Yeah, and then Bullet King is known for dropping Sentry. Lorry Driver is known for dropping Final Mission. You get the idea, right? And it then means that you can target stuff. It means you could log on a daily basis, look down the list, and be like, all right, today I'm looking for Alpha Bridge. Cool, I'll do this, and this. Job done, kind of thing. It's not going to break the game because you're giving people. You're not going to give someone an infinite chance to farm it because there's still a finite number of HVTs. But it means you're not locking them out quite so much. That's a very kind of simple thing they could do. To kind of reiterate, solo players definitely need things to do. Things they can do on their own, but things they can also do. Matchmaking is still a very acceptable thing to present to a solo player and say, right, if you want to do this on your own, there is matchmaking. It's fine. Group activities can still exist. It should never be a case where solo players can do everything. I don't feel like incursions should be soloable. I don't think incursions are great anyway, but that's not the point. I don't think incursions should be soloable.
Okay. That's interesting. I kind of feel like they should be soloable.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, in what sets apart an incursion from any other activity right now?
Well, I mean,
other than its name?
I think what incursions are supposed to be, right? I liken them to sort of a lot more kind of like dungeons. I mean, you take World of Warcraft, right? dungeons or even to a certain extent raids. I know incursions are not raids, but like, you know, there are people out there that are the top 1% that can do it, but they're not tuned around players doing them solo, right? You don't often...
I know what you mean, but I think this is fundamentally like a very different game. I would definitely think it closer to something like Diablo in this regard. It's a looter. And I think that it would be awesome if I could solo an incursion because it's an interesting challenge. And, you know, if it scales to the number of people in my party, then do you know what I mean? Like, I would say raids, I completely agree with you. I think that has a very different connotation.
Maybe.
But I mean, it's terminologies here. Like, it's all whatever. It's all what you sort of, how you define the word. But like, I don't know. I would have personally no problem with incursions becoming soloable, scalable to my number of parties in my, you know, that I'm running with, because I just feel like there should be almost no sections of this game that are off limits to a solo player. Do you know what I mean? Like, almost no. I don't know. I totally get your perspective on it. I totally see the other side, but
yeah.
I would just love to open up more of it to the solo player than not. Because
I'm open to both sides. I'm definitely, you know, and to people watching, you know, don't think it is like, oh, suddenly Arekkz hates solo players. It's like, no, like, I'm open to like people doing, you know, whatever. I think it's also important to recognize in games like this that there are certain activities that people that have formed a group and want to work as a group, like, you know, this is their activity kind of thing. Like, it's what they go towards. But at the same time, you know, I wouldn't be... True, to your point, I wouldn't be against if they were like, all right, there's a solo mode for incursions. People can do it. It's hard. Maybe, I don't know, because you're doing it solo, there's something you might not get. I don't know how it's really going to plan out. But no, I'm definitely in agreement that a lot of stuff needs to be opened up for solo players. I just don't feel like not everything needs to be catered to, because if you do that inadvertently, then especially if they get the balancing wrong. Imagine if they balance it so that you can do it solo, and then suddenly it becomes a walk in the park as a group. Like, you've suddenly killed any kind of difficulty for groups, right?
Well, and that's the point, just about the scaling factor, you know, where it needs to become harder the more people you do it with, you know. And so, but all right, well, I think we're totally on the same page.
Cool. All right, sweet. So, moving on from there, relevant loot drops. So, obviously right now, loot is not the greatest, and, you know,
shitty.
The problem you have right now is that, you know, you get like 9 times out of 10, you get a piece of loot and it's not better than what you've got. You don't feel good about it, and you never feel like I can't remember the last time I picked something up. I was like, holy crap, that's amazing. Like, I don't actually remember that ever happening, right? And I think I mean, like, I've written
except your Midas.
Yeah, exactly. Except that was so good. I think the things that I've written down here is that you want to allow people to do specific activities for specific items. People want to know, like, quality. Here's the thing as well. Quality will be a lot more acceptable if people can kind of get what they're going after for, right? Like, if I spent so much time in the underground and I got blind after blind after blind piece, and it just frustrated me. It's like, you know what? If I was getting like the pieces that I wanted, or if I knew that by doing a specific activity I was getting the pieces, I would be a lot more forgiving of the fact that maybe it didn't drop in the exact role that I wanted, because at least I'm kind of I'm working within a pool that I want to, right? So. Again, to that point before, like, you know, some sort of intelligent loot system whereby it's like, you know, you do X activity for X loot, Y activity for Y loot, and then of course you are in a slightly better, more acceptable pool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm a huge fan of weighted drops.
Yeah.
Right? Because that system gets heaps of flack. It's not, and that what you're describing is weighted drops, where it's like I do an activity and I know what comes from that activity, generally speaking. The problem is not weighted drops. The problem is that there's nothing else on top of that, right? If you had a weighted drop system as it exists exactly like right now, but then you also had a second drop or third drop that dropped off a random table, then you're really killing two birds with one stone. You're getting the item that you know that you're going to want from that one activity, because that's it. But you're also getting something else from somewhere, like from any of the entire loot table, because like that's fine. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's cool, you know? So I kind of feel like, yes, totally agree with you, but let's just add that random extra piece of loot or two to the drop tables, and then I think it's problem solved. I really do think the solution is as simple as that.
Yeah. That and also to a certain extent for things that are definitely like stagnant. I mean, maybe even like some kind of rotational system as well. I mean, whether it be, I mean, you know, I always go back to HVTs, the fact that you know that like 99% of the time you're getting Lone Star, right? Because it's just like it's where it comes from, right? That's a problem. And whether we kind of use the idea I proposed earlier, where it's, you know, you go to specific targets for specific targets for specific drops, or whether instead you adopt a rotational system where it's like, you know, this week it's like Lone Star week for HVTs, next week it's Alpha Bridge week for these, right? You know, however that what happens. But yeah, no, I agree. You definitely want the random element in it as well, because if you do get to the point where it is just weighted, then you will eventually kind of get stagnant. It'll be like, all right, now I've got all my stuff, and I'm never going to fight this boss because I'll always get the same thing, right? So yeah, random element is good. Okay, cool. So unless you got anything more in there.
This section is around making drops more relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm very concerned about is I expect Massive will be giving us a lot more loot in the future.
Yes.
That's just my guess, because everyone's like, more loot, right? The challenge with that is that I also simultaneously think that they're going to like fix up, gear and make it more attractive, and that means less shitty stats. That means RNG is less important, right? And I have a genuine concern that we will reach a point where we just get all the items that we want really, really fast, right? I would really want a secondary system that sits over the top of all of this that allows us to earn, and this is my crazy idea, so just hear me out.
Okay.
Right? I would love a new tier of gear that is like slightly more powerful than current max level, so 268. So let's call it like level 280 gear score, okay? And I can buy them with some sort of currency, be it Phoenix credits or tokens or whatever. But when I buy it, I choose exactly what it is. I choose the gear set, I choose the slot, I choose the exact stats, and they all roll at max, okay?
Yep.
This for me is like, I would only get like one of these a week or maybe two of these a week for completing a variety of activities and earning enough currencies to be able to purchase these things. So like, why is this good? It's good because it gives me, the player, an incentive to do regular weekly activities, right? In pursuit of truly best in slot gear, okay? But it's not so best in slot that all my other gear looks shit in comparison, right? If we're talking a difference of 12 item levels, we're probably only talking an extra 5% worth of power. But the fact that I get to build that slot out to perfection means that I can complement my build. If RNG is against me and I just cannot get a pair of gloves that perfectly suit the build that is like exactly what I'm chasing. Like if I really need a pair of like Hunter's Faith gloves with marksman rifle damage and XXX stats on them, right? Then I just never get them dropping. This system is basically to civilize the RNG system overall. Yep. And while simultaneously encouraging me to complete endgame activities regularly, but it's giving me a very small drip feed of these things so that I'm not chasing this gear above all else. I'm still chasing other gear sets. I'm just also keeping this in the back of my mind that is also what I'm working towards. And over a 6-week period, I can get a fully perfect best in slot build, but that's just one build, and there are infinite build possibilities. I really think that the system needs to go this way, because I do worry that just grinding for gear, I think, is going to get really boring.
It does, yeah.
Especially just keeping ourselves just subject to the RNG gods forever, I think also gets really boring. So I think having a system like this would really just, I just think it's
a working system, right? I mean, like, you look at, again, I know we keep jumping back to it, but I mean, it's important to go and look at games that work, right? World of Warcraft, you do heroic dungeons and you get coins. Like, I forget what they're called up. It's been a long time since I played WoW, but you get
Valor points.
Yeah, you get points, and you get or when you're doing parts of raids, you get tokens, right? And then you can go to that raid vent that has the max tier gear, and you can buy those pieces, right? And there's nothing wrong, because there's nothing wrong with that, because there is a cap on how much you can earn per week, right? Which means, I think,
correct.
If I remember correctly, with like World of Warcraft, it was like you could only really get like 1, maybe 2 per week. And I mean, again, or like it's like raid lockouts, right? Destiny, you can earn 1 piece of gear from each of the different bosses, and then you're locked out for that week, right? It means progression is capped. It means you can never be you can't go and suddenly be like, all right, day 1's done, I'm maxed out, what do I do next, right? But then, yeah, I agree, because then you have the right balance. Because to your point before, you need to have enough RNG so that people keep grinding, so they don't get maxed out in day 1. But you also can't have people grinding endlessly, because
forever.
Because then you hate it, right? So yeah, that balance of grinding for gear whilst also gradually working up towards something better is a great model. It's a bit of both, and then people have it's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So I think it's a system that works. Right. We've seen it work in other games. I would be completely happy for it to work in Division.
Yep.
Sweet.
Agreed. Tick.
Cool. All right. Well, then, just before we move into the very last section, which is Dark Zone and PvP balancing, let's just slide quickly into economy, because the economy in this game is a mess, right? You have Phoenix credits, you have directive intel, you have other intel, you have flipping weapon kits. I lose track of how many there are. I can't even count.
Oh.
It's like, you know, that GIF, like, how do I
like
hold
a
all
mobile
of these
game.
things? Yeah, it's like a mobile game, exactly. So
Yeah.
there needs to be, and plus, of course, you know, on top of that, you have different rep. You have, you know, your underground rank. You have your level. You have your dark zone rank, which can go up and down. Which, you know, there's obviously the fundamental problem with that is that, you know, as we've discussed before, dark zone, you know, you spend ages to grind to, like, I'm dark zone rank 94, right? I mean, you remember that day when they announced, was it for 1.1 or 1.2? They announced there would be something you could buy for dark zone rank 90, right? I spent
That's right,
an
yeah.
entire week grinding every single day in the dark zone. I got to rank 90, and it was Valkyria. Like, come on, man.
That's right.
So there's some
Massive
issues.
please.
Yeah. So what your main gripe points with economy?
No, I mean, look, I think you nailed it all with all that stuff. There's just so much stuff to grind and so many currencies to earn that it just feels like just overwhelming.
Yes.
And there's the rewards aren't there at the end of the day for it. Like, just strip it back. Like, what do you want people to do? Do you want people just to play a lot and be rewarded for that? They're already being rewarded through loot drops. Why do we need another system that rewards playing a lot? If the purpose of that system is to smooth out the RNG curve so that if I play for like 100 hours and still don't get my drop and I've earned all this rep and these currencies that I can spend on items, then like build a system that allows me to do that, similar to what I described before. Like, if I've earned 500,000 Dark Zone funds and still have not got an item that I want, maybe I can buy a token that allows me to choose a gear set. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is about streamlining the economy
Completely.
by providing, like, reduce the number of currencies and be really clear about what are these currencies actually giving you at the end of the day. Like, what is the benefit that this currency provides? And I think part and parcel with that is also crafting, because crafting is a component of the economy.
Yes.
And I mean, crafting is non-existent right now. It's just like, sure, you can craft some mods for your gear, and that's fine. And we need to craft like weapon kits every now and then. But other than that, the system is completely dead. And I mean, I don't think it should go back to how it was before, where it was basically the best way of gearing up. But it should absolutely not be like it is now, where it's like,
well, it should be an equal method, right? It should be, you know, again, like, it should be, if I can't get this, I mean, to your point of before, like, you know, the coin, if I can't get this piece randomly, let me at least craft something to tide me over, right? And it's like, you should be able to, it's like the patchwork quilt, right? You know, I make some of my gear from high-end activities. I make some of it from crafting, and maybe one of those pieces I bought with one of those fancy endgame tokens. You know, and then eventually you
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that definitely is how. Totally. And also, there are some pointless intels. I mean, like, why do I have to grind random stupid enemies to go and fight an HVT? That doesn't help me at all.
Oh,
maybe
so
from the narrative point of view, it's like, oh, you're gathering intel. It's like, but no, I don't want to gather intel. Tell me that there's a wanted target, and I'll go kill him. Like, don't do it.
Exactly.
And also, like, why do I have to go and grind the underground to get intel to make it so I can then put on directives to make it more difficult? Just let me put on directives to make it more difficult. Like, what the hell?
Couldn't agree more.
So,
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, ditch those completely and make it so, you know, Phoenix credits is fine. Add in maybe like an extra endgame coin. Weapon kits I still think are pointless. Just make us pay for it, right? Like, just pay to recalibrate stuff. That's just crap as well. So yeah, definitely streamline it. So
yeah, but I think the last thing as well is just like, right now the only way to earn money properly is to sell your gear, and when you do that, it means you can't deconstruct it, which means you can't craft. So no, sure, one perspective is that's a good tension, because I'm choosing, like, am I investing in my existing gear or am I crafting additional gear? But I just kind of feel like it sucks. Like, there should be a better way to earn money than selling items. Like, I just feel like that's kind of shitty. So I'd really like to see that daily activities award significantly more credits.
Yes.
So that I don't have to, so I can still craft and I can recalibrate. Like, I like doing both of those things. I shouldn't have to choose between them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, completely agree. Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, that's a tick on that last one. So, the final topic, Dark Zone and PvP balance. And this is, of course, the last kind of point on 1.4 they want to address. Now, to a certain extent, some of the things we proposed up until now, like, you know, rebalancing the weapons, rebalancing the gear, fundamentally changing the gear, a lot of that will, of course, improve some of the experience. It won't fix it, but we, you know, by putting in place some of the stuff we've already discussed, we'll have some improvements in place. But I think the fundamental issue that we have here, you have two camps of people, right? You have the people that are in the Dark Zone that enjoy PvP and are there, you know, they want to have the battles. And you have the people that just, they go into the Dark Zone because they have to, but they don't want to, you know, they want to do it as a PvE environment, right? And that's your problem, because it then means that also, you know, for the people that are just there to, you know, do their stuff and kind of move on, they have a horrible experience because the people that are after PvP are shooting them. They don't want to fight back. The people that are looking for challenges are not getting their challenges because they're not fighting challenging targets, and then everyone else is having a horrible time. Now, I've been, right from day one. I'm someone that has enjoyed the Dark Zone, and as someone that used to play on a PvP server in World of Warcraft, I'm very used to people running up on me and killing me in the middle of a quest, right? So I always understood from the start what the Dark Zone is, right? But I do also recognize that if you are forced to go into an environment like that, and you don't necessarily want to, then it creates a horrible experience, right? One of the things that the World of Warcraft does well is that when you create your character, you choose if you want to go on a PvP server or you want to go on a PvE server. It then means that if you actively choose PvP, and were this in the Division, you choose a PvP server, you know that if you go in the Dark Zone, you will get run up on, people will kill you, people can steal your stuff, and you've accepted that choice. If you choose a PvE server, then of course you know that you go in, and of course that's not an option unless you maybe toggle it and enable it. And the defining factor between that and the Division is that in World of Warcraft you have that choice, right? And you can control that. In Division you can't, which then tries to force everyone into this experience that not everyone enjoys. So,
very much.
When we understand, but the thing we need to understand is that 1.4 is a fix patch, right? It's not a content patch. So asking them to add drastically, split the game and say add 2 servers where, when you create your character, you choose PvP, create your character, choose PvE. Maybe that's something they can do in the future, but I don't think is a viable suggestion for now, right? So perhaps, I know your thoughts on this, but maybe a thing we could kind of go down is you actually just split the game as it exists now. Why not take the stuff you do in the Dark Zone, push it into the open world in PvE?
Yeah.
So for the people that don't ever want to engage in PvE, they just do it in the open world. And the people that you then know that if you go in the Dark Zone, you're going in there because you are there for the intent of PvP.
Totally. I think it's the most obvious and logical suggestion in the world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got this huge open world that is so awesome and so untouched in terms of we go out there for HVTs, but if just fill that area with heaps of mobs and let us choose the difficulty that we go at, you know what I mean? Let us just scale that somehow so that it's the right difficulty, and let us just grind. If we want to grind, let's do that. Do you know what I mean? And then if you want a PvP, there's the Dark Zone. That's the place where you PvP. Sure, there needs to be some rewards for that. There needs to be a proper reward system set up to encourage PvP. And if you want to keep that PvE, PvP hybrid in there, then that obviously needs to be more rewarding than just the straight PvE in the open world, because obviously the Dark Zone is more risky. So you need to look at the reward structures that support both of those things. Yeah. But absolutely, I agree with you. Splitting it out, having the open world be the PvE Dark Zone without any PvP at all, just you and your own party, or even maybe other players as well. I don't know. That would just be a very cool idea. I would totally be down for that.
I mean, again, to your point, I suppose the way to make that work as well would be that you would still have some loot that was perhaps exclusive to the Dark Zone. In an ideal world where we fix gear sets, and there are good gear sets, right? Maybe you still have a gear set that is only obtainable in the Dark Zone, right? It's fair to say, because then you need to give people something that, again, World of Warcraft, I'm sorry I keep returning, but you do arenas, you get PvP gear, right? You're not going to get it anywhere else, right? Yes, PvP gear is not useful in raids, but it's still a gear set you cannot get anywhere else, right? So you have that model in Division. You have, say, we're in the Dark Zone, we have new gear set number 10, whatever we'll call it, right? And you can only get it in the Dark Zones. People know, all right, fine, I've done my stuff, I'm happily... Because also the thing is, think about it this way as well, right? People will probably be a lot more okay with going in the Dark Zone if they could do some of the Dark Zone stuff outside to the point where they feel comfortable with their build. The problem people have a lot of the time now as well, it's not just the fact that you're getting robbed in the Dark Zone and stuff is being taken from you. It's that you're getting robbed, but you have no chance to fight back, because people's builds maybe aren't as fine-tuned as the people that do spend a lot of time in the Dark Zone. It's horrible because they don't feel like they can fight back, and they're getting one-shot by enemies.
There is almost no outplay in the Dark Zone. There is just outgear and outnumber.
Yes, exactly.
That's ultimately 100%. What it breaks down
to.
98% of the time, that is it.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I used to live in the Dark Zone. I used to play the Dark Zone every single day. It's been a long time since I've had battles in the Dark Zone and thought, you know what? Yeah, I lost that guy because that was a fun battle, that was a skill battle, that was a good battle. We were evenly matched. No, it's crap, he ripped through my health, he's better. Or, crap, I ripped through his health, he obviously wasn't ready for a fight. It's one of those two situations. Yeah. So, I think, I think, again, it comes with the relevant loot drops, right? Redistributing the loot, making it better all around, and it's fine, because then you can still distribute loot between things. You can say, all right, incursions have gear set A. Open world Dark Zone stuff where you fight some of those bosses can maybe be a source of gear set B and C. Dark Zone is a gear set of source D and E. and then you still have something for everyone, right? But it then means that there's a clear divide, because even HVTs, right? I was quite excited when they first did it. I thought, all right, it gives me a chance to go around the open world, and it was quite cool because there are some really cool places outside the dark zone that I just forgot even existed. But that was very short-lived, right? But you have that again in the open world. It promotes like walking around, doing loads of different stuff. You have loads of like supply drops, different things you can kind of get involved with, and then you have the dark zone. So I think that's
totally.
And it's an easy fix, right? Because it doesn't require new content. It's based in the world that exists right now, so it's actually a viable solution as opposed to something drastic like a new I would quite happily in the future. I would love to see. Do not get me wrong. I would love to see like battle royale and raids and stuff. But right now, based on what is like achievable, I think it will work, right?
Yeah, I agree, but I think the thing about what we're talking about is it doesn't actually solve the problem of PvP per se. It solves the reward structure in the sense that it doesn't pull PvE-focused players into the dark zone and have them be disappointed.
Yeah.
It really just aligns it so that PvP players know they're in the DZ for that reason. And similarly, PvE players have the space to grind out in the open world. I think the changes for PvP in terms of making it viable, like we could spend 4 hours talking about that right now, because in my view, like the entire PvP experience is broken top to bottom, and it's hard to even know where to start that conversation. But I mean, I would just personally say I think I remember PvP back in the beta, and PvP was excellent then because we essentially all had the same build. We were all the same level, and because there was no real build diversity, we were all the same, right? And you could actually kind of look at that one way as like gear normalization, right? And I really think that this needs to be a thing. I know many people disagree with this idea, but I'm personally laying my cards on the table. I am not interested in PvPing when it is not a level playing field.
No, I completely agree.
And when it comes to gear, like that is the ultimate differentiator in a game like this, and I don't like it. That's why I've actually never enjoyed PvPing in the dark zone, except in the beta when it was all equal. You know that when you add random gear into the mix, the person I shoot could have 700k HP. Or they could have 100k HP. I have no idea until I shoot them.
Yes.
They could be running a huge sticky bomb, or they could be running a ballistic shield, and they just whip it out the minute I engage. I don't know. And without that level playing field, without us having the same power of gear and having visibility on what abilities you're bringing to the table, without those things, I just think PvP is never going to be a truly satisfying experience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I totally leave room for that. But I've never seen a game with like really awesome, compelling, large-scale PvP that has these massive differences in terms of gear.
No, I completely agree.
I haven't seen that work.
Yeah, no, I'm in complete agreement. I mean, again, it goes back to when we spoke about gear right at the beginning when we were talking about reinventing it. We were kind of promoting a normalized system, right? Because I would much rather have skill battles, and I would much rather know that if I die in the dark zones, because that person is actively better than me, not because they happen to get the luck of the draw, get some slightly better gear, and have that, right? It's not, I know there'll be people that kind of in the comments that'll be like, oh no, you're just saying it because you always die in the dark zone. It's like, no, it's not that. There is a fundamental problem.
Get good.
There is a fundamental problem there. I mean, like you look at again. I'm doing this World of Warcraft thing again, but you look at like if you go into an arena, right, and you fight someone who has PvP gear, and you've gone in with like your raid gear, right? The person with the PvP gear, they're better than you, but they're not better. Or like their gear is more finely tuned, but it's not finely tuned to the point where they are unbeatable, right? It's finely tuned to they're more efficient. Maybe their cooldowns will be quicker. Maybe they'll be able to maybe they'll be able to chain a few more things together, or something that makes him slightly better in a PvP in like situation. But you can still beat them, right? There's still room for skill. This is the problem where the beta and pre 1.1 differs is that there was it was build. But there's also room for skill, and that's something they said way before. When I was covering the division before it even came out, there was an interview where they spoke about how it was something about like gear would make up like 40%, and they wanted like 60% to be skill or something like that, right? And that just doesn't exist now, right? That does not exist at all. It's not a case of there's no room for like if I'm up against you, right, and I've got like 200k DPS, 200k toughness, and you've got 700k toughness. It doesn't matter how skilled I am. realistically, I'm not really going to be able to take you down, right? Because
No.
you can just turn around and just like, do that. So it's like there's that gap for skill is non-existent right now, and that's the problem, right? It needs to be a normalized model, promote skill, which will promote much more exciting battles. You'll also probably find, for those people that enjoy the dark side, you'll probably find people will be more willing to put up a fight and actually have fun with you if it means there's actually a slightly more normalized model, because they'll be like, all right, you know what, I stand a chance against this guy. Not, oh, this guy's ripping through my health, holy crap, I've just used 5 medkits in the space of 2 seconds.
Yeah,
So,
totally agree with you. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, it's a big mess, and I think, as I said, you could literally have another community summit in Malmo that runs for like a month to talk about how to solve it, and you still wouldn't get to the bottom of it. I think it's just about making some iterative changes. Well, I think the first step is some big changes around some new design intent. Like right now, the current design does not work, so it's like, well, what do we actually want it to be? Try something small and then build on it over time. Because I just think that anyone here that thinks that Massive is going to fix the Dark Zone overnight is in for a huge amount of disappointment. I guarantee you the Dark Zone is like an 18-month journey for Massive. Like, I guarantee this, because there's just the PvP system is so far away from a rewarding PvP experience right now that it's going to be a very long time coming. So I mean, I'm happy to wait for that, because I think it'd be awesome if it worked. But I definitely don't expect that anytime soon. Certainly not this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's definitely important to realize that 1.4 is going to be a drastic change, right? It will be a fundamental reworking of a lot of stuff we know, but it will not be. The game won't be perfect afterwards, right? It will be much better than it is right now. Probably and hopefully to the point where it will be enjoyable again, and a lot of the things that you guys didn't like, or a lot of gripes, will hopefully be put at rest. But it won't be a 100% fix, right? But this is a great start, right? This is a great start, because not only do we have 1.4 with drastic changes, we have the PTS coming, which of course means that every single update from this point onwards will hit the PTS first. And while I know
that's amazing.
Yeah, well, yes, I know it's not on console players, and I know I'm a console player, so I'm an advocate for you guys. I know it's annoying. I'm gonna have to start my character again. It sucks, but at least it means that there are people out here. There's a big portion of the community that play on PC. We're going to be there, able to jump into, even if we're not there part of the elite task force, right? The elite task force is like, see it almost like PTS. The very beginning, they're like playing the first PTS, right? But then as soon as they're done and the PTS goes live, we're all gonna get hands on with 1.4, right? We're gonna be able to test it, and going forward, we're always gonna be able to have that communication point with Massive. They're gonna have the PTS forums. There's loads of places for us to communicate, and I feel like this is a turning point for the game, right? I've said it before, but it needs to be said again. Like, people. It takes a lot for a developer to outright say our game is broken, right? I mean, that's especially a developer with like someone like as big as Ubisoft behind them. It's people don't like to admit that stuff, right? Normally, developers will try and brush it under the carpet, fix it gradually, and not own up. But the fact that they've gone out and be like, you know what, it's in a bad place, let's fix it. That's commendable. I have massive respect for them. So I think it's in a good place, and I think. If we can kind of have this ongoing communication with this ongoing dialogue, I know that myself and SkillUp, we speak to the developers on a regular basis. We try where possible. Whenever you guys send stuff to us, or whenever you guys have issues, we do still try and communicate wherever we can. And we're just gonna have to keep going, right?
Yep, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, but I think this video has already gone on far too long. I do apologize. We were trying to hit like a half an hour mark. That's obviously not happening. But
it was never going to happen.
Rest assured that both myself and SkillUp actually have like a lot of notes written down, which we are also going to be sharing with Massive. So we'll give them this video, but we'll also, if they want like a TLDR version, they can read our notes. So we are trying to convey as much as we can. You guys let us know down below. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you guys, what you think of some of our proposed ideas, if you have better ideas. And yeah, I think for the time being, thank you for joining me, SkillUp. It's been awesome as always.
Cheers, man. Pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and hopefully the future gets bright. But until then,
I'm sure it will.
I'll catch you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.